There's this idea that we've all flirted with at some point in our lives that if love feels hard or dull or uncomfortable, it must be wrong. That if it doesn't feel exciting anymore, maybe it's not meant to last. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably had this thought cross your mind at least once. Would this feel easier with someone else? Because from the outside, it always looks greener, right? Someone else's relationship, someone else's chemistry, someone else's life. And when you're deep in the routine and the arguments and the familiarity, it's easy to believe that what you're missing is out there instead of right in front of you. I've believed that lie before, honestly, more than once. I've watched relationships fall apart, some my own, some not, because someone stopped tending to what they had and started imagining what it could be and how it could be better with someone else. And I've also watched relationships last, not because they were easier or anything, but because the people in them understood something most of us don't understand or learn until later. The grass is never greener somewhere else, it's just maintained better. So, welcome back to Chasing Stability. This episode isn't about staying in situations you need to leave. It's not about settling and ignoring red flags or romanticizing misery. It's about the part of love no one really prepares you for. The moment when novelty wears off, familiarity sets in, and you have to decide whether you're going to water what you have or start looking over the fence. Because love that lasts isn't one perfect story. It's 1,000 versions of love with the same person and the willingness to choose them again when it would be easier to not. And that choice, it's where everything changes. I remember the first time I really thought maybe it would be easier with someone else. There was a lot of fighting going on, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of feeling unseen and unheard and, constantly on edge. We weren't just disagreeing, we were completely missing each other. The conversations kept turning into these huge arguments, and small things felt big. And instead of feeling loved, I felt insecure, like I was always asking for more than someone could give. And that's the part people don't talk about enough. When love starts feeling like effort on only one side, when you're trying to explain your needs and somehow end up feeling needy instead, when reassurance turns into frustration, when you start wondering if maybe this just isn't supposed to be this hard. And that's when the comparison creeps right in. Not because you're looking to cheat or betray or anything like that, but because your heart is tired. You start thinking, surely it wouldn't feel like this with someone else. Surely there's a version of love that doesn't require so much explaining. Surely there's someone out there who would just get it. And instead of seeing the relationship for what it is, two imperfect people struggling to stay connected, your mind starts romanticizing the idea of something easier, something calmer, something that doesn't trigger all of your insecurities all at once. But what I didn't understand then is that pain narrows your vision. When you feel unloved, everything else starts looking like relief or a lifeline. I wasn't imagining greener grass because my relationship was hopeless. I was imagining it because what I had felt, dry, chaotic, and neglected. And sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. When love stops feeling safe, your mind looks for the exit signs, not because you don't care, but because you're desperate to feel okay again. That's where I went wrong. Instead of asking what needs care here, I was already halfway out emotionally, wondering if something else would hurt less. And that's the moment the grass starts looking greener. not because it is, but because you've stopped watering where you're literally standing in that moment. The reason that greener grass thought shows up so easily in moments like this is because love doesn't start the way it lasts. In the beginning, love is like super light. You're curious about each other. You're not cautious. You're showing up with your best sides, not your bruises. You're learning each other, not managing each other. Early love runs on novelty or chemistry or intention. You're listening more closely. You're trying harder. You're choosing each other more deliberately. Not because you have to, but because you want to. You want to learn this person. You're infatuated. And that's not fake. It's just incomplete, right? Because in the beginning, you're not carrying history yet. You haven't hurt each other. You haven't misunderstood each other 10 times in a row. You haven't learned each other's triggers or defenses or fears. So, of course, it feels easier. Of course, it feels exciting. Of course, it feels like this must be how love is supposed to feel. But what we don't realize until later is that ease doesn't mean depth yet. It means potential. Real love doesn't get tested in the honeymoon phase. It's just a fact. It gets tested when two people stop performing and start actually revealing who they truly are. When needs get complicated, when communication gets extremely clumsy, when insecurity starts showing up uninvited. That's when love either matures or starts feeling heavy. And if you're not prepared for that shift, it's easy to assume something's just gone wrong, that the love has faded, or that you've chosen the wrong person, that this shouldn't be this hard. But most of the time, what's actually happening is that love has moved from chemistry into responsibility, from excitement into maintenance. And that transition, that's where a lot of people panic. I've been one of them. And this is usually also the point where familiarity starts playing tricks on your mind. Because once you know someone deep down, like you really know them in and out, they stop feeling like possibility and start feeling like reality. You know how they react when they're stressed. You know what they avoid. You know where they fall short. And suddenly, the person you once felt so excited by is now the person who knows exactly how to get under your skin and set you off. That's when strangers start looking appealing. Not because they're better or they're actually appealing to you, but because they haven't disappointed you yet. They haven't seen you at your worst either. They haven't failed you yet, or you haven't failed them. They haven't hurt you in ways that still stings. And unfamiliarity feels like relief when you're absolutely exhausted in this stage. So your brain starts whispering, it wouldn't feel like this with someone else. Someone else would appreciate me more. Someone else wouldn't make me feel this insecure. But that thought isn't the truth. It's discomfort talking. Because what we often forget is this: every relationship eventually reaches this stage, every single one. Every long term connection moves from discovery into maintenance, from novelty into that responsibility stage. From this feels extremely easy to be with this person into this requires work and intention. And when you're not taught that this transition is normal, you mistake this discomfort for incompatibility. Again, I have stepped in this greener grass more than I can count. You assume the problem is the person, not the season. That's why so many people step out right here. They don't leave because love is gone. They leave because love stops feeling effortless. Instead of leaning in, they look outward. Instead of communicating, they compare. Instead of watering what they have, they start imagining what they don't. And sometimes that looks like emotional withdrawal. Sometimes it looks like cheating. Sometimes it looks like convincing yourself that the relationship is holding you back, when in reality, it's just asking you to grow. Now, this doesn't mean every hard season should be endured, right? Some relationships do need to end. Some patterns are unhealthy. Some love isn't meant to last forever, but that's not what we're talking about today. I just want to make that very clear. We're talking about the moments when love gets real, when two imperfect people really have to realize just how imperfect they are, together and separately. In that moment, that's the crossroad that everyone gets stuck on. You either choose to tend to what you have, or you convince yourself it would be greener and easier and less stress somewhere else. And most of the time, the grass only looks greener because no one's been walking on it yet. Fallen for that a couple of times as well. But this is where faith actually has a lot to say, which kind of shocked me when I learned this, because this idea that something else would be better isn't new. It's as old as relationships themselves. There's a principle in scripture that basically warns us about this exact moment, that when dissatisfaction creeps in, the enemy doesn't usually create new problems. He exaggerates the existing ones. He zooms in on your partner's flaws. He highlights what's missing instead of what's present. He amplifies these frustrations until it feels like proof you have chosen wrong. Not because your relationship is doomed, but because distraction is easier than destruction. If he can convince you to believe that the grass is greener somewhere else, he doesn't have to tear anything apart. You'll do it yourself. And that's the dangerous part, because suddenly you're not looking at your relationship with this clear lens anymore. You're looking at it through irritation, through unmet expectations, through exhaustion, through insecurity. You stop seeing all the effort that your partner is bringing forward and only notice mistakes. You stop remembering why you chose them in the first place, and you fixate on what they're not doing right now. And the Bible is really clear about this pattern. Comparison, discontentment, and unchecked desires will distort your perception. Not everything that feels like conviction is wisdom. Sometimes it's just impatience. This doesn't mean you ignore problems. It doesn't mean you stay silent when you should be speaking out. It doesn't mean you spiritualize neglect, right? But it does mean you pause before assuming the solution is replacement. Because faith teaches us something uncomfortable but extremely necessary. What you don't tend to, you eventually resent. And resentment is sneaky. It doesn't announce itself out in the open. It just slowly convinces you that effort isn't worth it anymore. That's why so many people don't leave relationships in these explosive moments. They drift out during quiet dissatisfaction. They don't wake up wanting someone else. They wake up tired of choosing. And spiritually speaking, that's the moment you're most vulnerable. Not when things are bad, but when they're hard and you're tempted to believe easier exists somewhere else. Love that lasts isn't one love story. It's so many wrapped into one. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of get tripped up. I know I have. We're taught to believe that if it's right, it should always feel right. Like the same connection, the same spark, the same version of each other standing side by side. But that's not really how humans work. People change. They evolve constantly. They shed these layers of their old selves and they grow into new seasons, new stresses, new versions of themselves, new work, new life, new children, all of the things. So of course, love has to change too. I've learned that the relationships that actually last aren't built on one consistent feeling. They're built on the willingness to meet each other again and again and again. You don't fall in love once, is basically the point here. You fall in love with who they are now, and then again, who they become, and then again, after life humbles you both, and then again, after conflict or healing or growth or children or marriage and time and all the things. That's why long lasting love looks less like fireworks and more like reintroductions. It's saying, okay, you're not who you were when we first met, but I am still madly in love with you and I'm still choosing you every single day. And there's something so beautiful in that to me. It shows that choice matters more than chemistry ever could, because chemistry gets you through the beginning, but character gets you through the middle. Commitment every single day or every hour gets you through the seasons where you feel like strangers. This is the part nobody romanticizes. Unless you've had someone in your corner who was willing to be uncomfortably honest with you about what real relationships look like, you've probably never experienced it. Because a lot of people think they understand this concept until they're the one who walks away, convinced it'll be easier somewhere else, and ends up having to learn this lesson the hardest way possible. The lesson is universal in this situation, in my opinion. The person you're with isn't the same version you fell in love with. You don't always understand each other. Love feels quieter. It requires curiosity instead of certainty. And that's where a lot of people panic. They think something's wrong, that they lost it, right? That the grass must be greener over here somewhere else. So they leave for greener grass and just learn this lesson. Maybe in a couple months, maybe in a couple years. Nothing was broken. You were just standing at the beginning of a new chapter with the same person that you always loved. And chapters aren't meant to feel identical. The couples who make it aren't the ones who never struggled. They're the ones who understood that love doesn't end when it changes or when it gets hard or when it forces you to look inward and grow up. It deepens there, because when you learn to love someone across multiple versions of themselves, that's not settling. That is divine choosing, and choosing someone again and again is the most intentional kind of love that there might ever be, in my opinion, at least. I remember scrolling one night and coming across this like older couple being interviewed on the street by some random kid. You know, they got stopped. Who knows if it's real? They had to be in their like 70s though, this couple. They were just standing side by side, holding hands, answering the questions being asked about their marriage, still looking at each other like they were totally in love, like young love, like, oh, swooning over each other. Imagine like the look that you see in The Notebook, just looking at each other with pure love. You know, you get it. And the guy who had just stopped them on the street asks them something that caught my ear. And it was, what's the secret to loving someone for this long? And the husband smiles and says, I've loved a lot of different versions of her. And the wife laughed and said, and I've loved a lot of different versions of him. They started listing them: the young version, the tired version, the version they didn't necessarily like at that moment, the struggling version, the version that didn't always get it right, the version that grew softer, the version that grew stronger as well. And that kind of hit me like right in my heart. They weren't talking about one love story. They were talking about a lifetime of choosing each other again and again as they change all the time. That kind of love doesn't come from finding the perfect person. The perfect person doesn't exist. It comes from staying long enough to meet the new versions and deciding each time yes, I still love this person just as much as I did before. So maintaining is the difference, right? It's what makes it or breaks it. It's plain and simple because love doesn't fall apart most of the time from one big betrayal. I mean, it does, sure, but not all of the time. It just starts to erode quietly through missed conversations or unspoken needs or assumptions instead of curiosity, comfort instead of effort. Maintaining is the choice to stay engaged after the butterflies settle because they will settle. Do not get it twisted. Everyone's always due. But you can decide to have them again over the new version of the same person that you love every single time that they change. It's choosing to water what you already have instead of staring over the fence, wondering if something else would be easier. But here's the part that I think matters most in this whole portion of this episode. Maintenance only works when both people are doing it. One person watering the relationship while the other just shows up when it's convenient, that's not maintenance, right? That's emotional burnout. And I'm sure we've all felt that one too. Real growth in love happens when both people understand that change is inevitable. You're not dating the same person forever. You're choosing to love someone who will evolve, heal, regress, grow, and surprise you for the rest of your life if you end up marrying them. And every time one of you changes, the relationship has to be maintained again, not rebuilt from scratch, but tended to, adjusted, relearned. That's where long lasting love gets its depth, not from staying the same, but from choosing each other through the changes. Maintenance looks like asking, who are you becoming right now? And how do I love that version of you as well? And being willing to answer that question about yourself as well, because the grass isn't greener somewhere else. It's greener where two people decide it's worth the work, right? For the rest of the relationship, however long and however in depth that's going to be. I haven't found my person yet. I don't say that from a place of bitterness or disappointment. I say it from a place of clarity. Because even without having my forever love standing next to me, I know what real love looks like, especially now. I've watched it be lived out in my friends' lives, my family's lives, and marriages that didn't just survive, but they softened and they deepened and evolved over time. And you can see it, you witness it. I've seen what it looks like when two people choose each other on the days it's easy and on the days it would be simpler to walk away. I've seen people that don't panic when things get hard, they lean in. Love that doesn't scan the horizon for something better, it remembers what it already has. And I've also seen the other side. I've lived it. I've been the person who looked around and wondered if the grass might be greener somewhere else. I've been the person who stayed half checked out instead of fully invested. And I've been the person left for greener grass as well, only to realize later that what looked greener was just less honest, less deep, and less maintained. Nothing more, nothing magical, just different dirt. Because greener grass isn't proof of a better relationship, it's proof of where effort is being placed. The grass isn't greener because the person is different or better or perfect. It's greener because someone is watering it, it's nurturing it. So before you let comparison creep into the relationship that your mind is wondering about, before you romanticize someone else's life or relationship or connection, before you start convincing yourself that love isn't supposed to feel like work, ask yourself one honest question. Where am I watering? Am I nurturing what I have or just noticing what I don't? Am I choosing presence or fantasizing about ease? Am I staying curious or slowly disconnecting? Because love that lasts isn't accidental, it isn't lucky, and it definitely isn't effortless. It's built on the ordinary days and the uncomfortable conversations, the seasons where choosing each other is a decision, not a feeling. And the truth is, most of us don't lose love because it wasn't real. We lose it because we stop maintaining it one way or another. And I think this is where I'm going to leave you today. Not with a perfect answer, but with an honest question you can sit with a little longer after this episode ends. So, if this episode hit close to home, do me a favor, share it with someone who might be questioning where they're watering. Post it, send it, talk about it. Help me grow this little community. These are the conversations that could actually change an outcome, or I like to think they could at least. So if you haven't already, please follow Chasing Stability wherever you are listening so you don't miss out on what's coming up next. I'd also love to hear from you. So drop a comment or a DM or a thought that this episode stirred up for you. This space exists because of you. So as you move through your week, keep these with you. Choose presence, water what's real, and love intentionally. This is Chasing Stability, and I will meet you guys in the in between next Tuesday.